go over to UNLV. Dan Mullen is back in the picture in college football. He is the head coach of the Rebels of Las Vegas. Yeah, I love the hire. What do you say? Uh, Dan Mullen's a great coach. All right, and now you have this funny thing called the transfer portal, right? Where UNLV wasn't going to recruit at a super high level regardless, with him there, with him not there. Now you can just go pick out players in the transfer portal. Like Dan Mullen's not was that he's not a great recruiter, which he didn't have to do at Mississippi State. He just had to elevate the talent that he had and bring in a great quarterback, right? He had a really great staff there defensively. They did a lot of work for him there. So Dan Mullen just needs his quarterback, bit of a defensive staff, and now he's going to be dipping in the transfer portal, and he's got talent to work with, right? He's got more resources than he needs to win at UNLV at that level for the competition that they're playing against. I think this is a fantastic hire for them, and I think they did a really, really good job going and getting him.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's going to be intriguing. I think a lot of people, have, when you think Dan Mullen, the head coach, you go back to how it ended at Florida. Like, yes, it was bad and it flamed out, and it looked like he was a guy that, was going to take Florida back to being what Florida was under Urban Meyer when Dan Mullen was there at Florida. But he was a pretty damn good coach, right? Offensively, we know what he does, right? We also know how success he had at a program with limited resources at like Mississippi State in the SEC. Yes, it was so much different 10 years ago than it is today, in college football in general. But the reality is like that happened, and you cannot take that away from him and what he did there too. And also like he kind of was able to rebuild his brand just a little bit at ESPN. I thought he was pretty good there. He also was making solid money at ESPN. He's making great money from Florida and the buyout. He got there, the $12 million buyout there. He didn't have to take this job here. He wanted this job there. I think a lot of people were waiting for Mullen to kind of come back into coaching at a spot where he can kind of come in and, don't have to recruit a ton, right? Just kind of do his thing and call plays. And here he is at UNLV making ton, a ton of money. Holy cow. $3.5 million a year is ridiculous from the Mountain West, ridiculous from UNLV, ridiculous in the G5. You talk about, an investment, right, in your program, right? So even the Pac-12 schools, the Pac-2, right? You're making over $1 million more than both Dicker and Bray made this past season at Washington State and Oregon State, respectively. You're making over $1 million more than what Alex Golish and Jeff Traylor and some of the other highest paid coaches were in the G5. We talked about Barry Odom in that Purdue video and what he did revitalizing this program, and they're kind of ready to pounce on it and capitalize on it. This is big time. This is a massive investment. The UNLV athletic director kind of made headlines because he talked about how they didn't have the money to pay, after the first couple seasons on the contract, which is fair and probably true. But I think a little bit more headline than actual meat of the story because they'll get to it eventually. I'm not worried about that and what that means for this program. It's something to monitor for sure, but I'm not too worried right now as we stand in 2025 in year one of his contract. You talk about $3.5 million. That's more than what UCLA, Deshaun Foster's making. Big Ten, the Big Ten coach, Deshaun Foster,
Double what they paid Barry Young.
double.
Now
And Barrett was a
that
big hire too
does
at the time.
that does it's almost double what Jay Norvell makes. I'm looking at an article in 2024. He was the highest paid coach in October. I don't know what these salaries look like now, what kind of extensions there are, right? This has to recalibrate your expectations of UNLV, right? Because like when we talked about UNLV expectations 2 years ago, it was like make a bowl game, and you were like a
Stay
hero,
forever.
Yes. What do you want? Stay here forever. You make a bowl game, but now if you're paying a coach 3.5, that has to reflect your expectations. It has to.
It's cutthroat. It's become a cutthroat. It's going to be a cutthroat job. Dan Mullen, like, is a legit chance he gets fired from this job. Now, do they have logistically? Do they have the money to actually do that and pay his buyout and all that
No,
stuff? probably won't.
No.
But you talk about expectations being crazy high. Like they have to nail this hire. Like it can
And unless they rejected, at least
Pac-12.
one of where they rejected the Pac-12. Like they were saying Mountain West build something there, and they want to freaking dominate everyone and get those comfortable playoff bids. I mean, that's what they want, and they just might get that with Dan Mullen. Now here's the thing with that. So that's what we talked about, recalibrating expectations. So in these grades, like I think like in a lot of people's mind, like this is an A plus hire, right? But I think you have to recalibrate for expectations. Okay, because you paid him $2.5 million, I think the grade that you give UNLV goes a little bit lower because of the expectations that comes with the money that you're paying that coach, and also to recalibrate expectations for the program now that they've tasted winning and they can with the resources that they have.
Yeah.
I think you do have to recalibrate that just a little bit. It's not an automatic A, right? In my opinion,
No, but it
if you're
doesn't
paying
mean
like if you're paying like 1.5, yeah, yeah, I'd be giving that an A. Like, but I just expectations are high. They are. They really are.
here's the thing that like, and yes, just because you pay someone more doesn't mean he's gonna work harder and better and all that kind of stuff. But it's more about the financial commitment that comes with it, right? Assistant salary, NIL, other different things that you need to win in this day and age of college football. And also, Dan Mullen was able to sit there and digest it from a third party view, talk to coaches, talk to G5 coaches, talk to Power Five coaches, TV networks, all these different things that he was able to do at ESPN and be able to prepare for this job. And he didn't take this job just for the paycheck, like I talked about. Like he actually thinks he can win this job, which he is not wrong to think that at all. It's super, super, super interesting. It's also where like we're giving him a pretty solid grade, and even though it's going to be high, like just because it's a B grade doesn't mean it's not going to be a hell of a higher, and also crazy success because your expectations are super, super high for Dan Mullen. Let me get into the staff here real quick, if you don't mind. So obviously we know Dan Mullen, the offensive guy, right? So a couple things I want to see from the staff here. I want to see recruiters, so Dan Mullen doesn't have to do that, and I also want to see defensive guys and offensive guys that can buy into his system and develop guys as well. So on the offensive side of the ball, the OC will be Corey Dennis. He'll also be the quarterbacks coach. He's a guy that's one of the rising names in college coaching. He's a young kid. He was, like I said, the quarterbacks coach at Tulsa. He's also at Ohio State the past 5 seasons. Before that, his quarterbacks coach was there for 9 years total. He's also at Georgia Tech as a wide receiver, playing there back when he was in college. Wide receiver coach is going to be Dell Alexander, familiar name for our UNLV folks. He's been there 3 different times. He was the interim head coach during the bowl games. He was the wide receiver coach past couple seasons there. Obviously, Ricky White, doing all that, what he did with him. He's also been at Georgia Tech, Notre Dame, Arizona State, Wisconsin. A lot of big time football he has coached and been a part of. That end coach is going to be Adrian Mays. Last 2 seasons at Tulsa with that connection to Corey Dennis. He also coached at North Texas 4 years prior to that for 4 years. Helped recruit and develop right Varkey Gums, if you remember that hot commodity name in the transfer portal market just a couple cycles ago. Freshman All-American tight end there. He also coached in the NFL with the Jets and the Chargers as well. Running back coach is going to be Quentin Ganther. He coached at Utah past 3 seasons, so familiarity in that mountain time zone there. Like I said, we running backs coach there the past couple seasons with Mike Bernard, Jaquin Jackson, a couple very good running backs there. Was with Weber State for 7 years prior to that. Was also in the NFL just a couple
Nate
times.
Johnson.
He didn't deserve that. Well, maybe. But he was also an all Mountain West running back when Utah was in the Mountain West. So he's got that familiarity with the conference there. The O-line coach is going to be Mike Saline. We talk about this a lot, where I want my offensive staff, my coordinator, play caller, head coach, whatever it is, and my offensive line coach to be connected. So the offensive line coach here is Mike Saline. He worked with Dan Mullen back at Florida from 2020 to 2021. Was also the past 3 years at Ohio State working with Corey Dennis. So there's crossover with Mullen and there's crossover with Corey Dennis, things that I love to see with my offensive coaching staff.
Yeah, And you're just gonna trust Dan Mullen to get that right.
Yeah.
He's a star. And like I'm
If he can, it's going to be big problems.
I mean, if you scroll this transfer portal list, like yeah, they lost a lot of guys, but like you scroll through this list of transfers that they've gotten in the portal, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, and you're like, oh, Dan Mullen might mean business here in the era of the transfer portal.
Hope so. Well, I mean, it's also like with Abner Sharon too. It's a little bit more streamlined. I think he picked and chose his spot wisely. I don't think this is a fluke that he's joining in 2025. Defensively, the important side, right? In terms of trusting Dan Mullen to get the offensive right, let's have a good defense. Defense coordinator is going to be Zach Arnett. Yes, that Zach Arnett, who was the head coach at Mississippi State. I know, brace yourself. Don't you worry. He was a damn good defensive coordinator.
Wait, wait.
Thank you. He's also going to be linebacker coach. I think this is fantastic. Yes, so Dan Mullen, coach of Mississippi State, and so did Zach Arnett. There was no crossover there. Zach Arnett was a Mike Leach guy, and obviously, took over just a terrible situation. Did not make it any better with how he performed as the head coach, obviously, but he was the defensive coordinator for Mississippi State, was damn good there. Was also the defense coordinator in the Mountain West at San Diego State before that. Was really freaking good there. Was there for 9 years at San Diego State. Only a couple as the DC, but obviously they're working his way up in that program. So very familiar with the Mountain West. Also played linebacker at New Mexico in the Mountain West. So yeah, listen, I'm in. I'm in on Zach Arnett. Safeties coach, Paul Gunther. He's also going to do. Oh yeah.
Sorry, excuse me, why would like I'm gonna reiterate exactly what you said, but I just need people to listen to this. Like he was set up to fail at Mississippi State. Now he made the decision to go away from the offense. Like the offense was structured around that air raid, right? And when you deviate that and the type of offensive lineman that you recruited, the type of wide receivers that you recruited, right? The type of quarterback that you had in there, the lack, yeah, the lack of tight ends, it makes it really tough to switch up your offense in just 1 year. And having to replenish that was tough. Zach Arnett because he didn't love that offense. He wanted to change it up, and it didn't work out in Mississippi State. Now look, Mississippi State I think got a good coach in Jeff Levin, and it might work out there, it might not, whatever. But I think Zach Arnett, it does not change the fact that he is a fantastic defensive coordinator. It does not change that. So continue.
No, and also he was at Ole Miss most recent this past season, who, by the way, had its best defense we've seen there in a long time. Safeties coach will be Paul Ginther. He's also the associate head coach. A lot of NFL experience. This is his first job in D1 football, so we'll see how that goes there. The D-line coach will be Ricky Lago. He's been the defensive line coach past couple seasons at UNLV, was at ULM before that, also coached at Washington State up in Pullman. He's done pretty well at UNLV, I will say. He was also a really good defensive tackle himself in college at North Carolina State in the 90s. The outside linebacker coach is Jeremy Bruce. He was GA with SMU, with Oregon State, Kentucky, Fresno State, also at Wyoming as well. I think quality control there. So flavor in the Power 4, Power 2, also in the Mountain West as well with Wyoming and Fresno State. Lastly, the cornerbacks coach is going to be Akeem Davis. This is his second season at UNLV as the cornerbacks coach, was also the co-defensive coordinator at Austin, PA prior to that, coming to UNLV. So overall, solid staff, I will say, highlighted by Zach Arnett, who will get talked about, and I probably will be talked about in way more of a negative light than he deserves to be or should be, because put some respect on that name as a defensive coordinator. He, I think, will be very nice. And also, like you talk about having major coaching edges where you have Dan Mullen offensively and Zach Arnett defensively, who at some point were considered two of the better at their respective positions in the SEC. Give me that any day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Yeah. So I mean, are you ready to talk expectations and give grades?
Yeah.
Okay. So expectation. I think the expectation should be to compete for a Mountain West championship. Right. That is my recalibrated expectation for UNLV. So we talk about this every time. A B is meeting expectations, and A, when we give it A, is exceeding. C is not meeting expectations. for Dan Mullins. Okay. I went on and gave him a B plus higher. Like, and maybe that should be higher because he physically his higher end contract actually recalibrates the expectations of the program. So like
fair, but yeah,
it's a little unfair, right? So why give him a B plus? That's like, so you're telling me he's going to probably exceed expectations? Yeah. What are the expectations? To compete for a Mountain West championship every single year. Okay, and then top of that, I think he's going to make the playoffs in his stint at UNLV. If it's more than 2 years, I think that he will make the college football playoffs as a G5 bid. I do. Because those teams in the Mountain West, they're moving out of there, right? Now, that doesn't give you a lot of wiggle room as UNLV as a program to lose in your out of conference games, losing conference, right? You pretty much have to go 12-0 with that kind of schedule in the Mountain West. I mean, look at what Barry Odom did this year. I mean, Syracuse game should have won that game. Jackson Woodard dropped a blame interception that would have won them the game. And then Syracuse ended up going down and scoring and win the game. Boise State, you talked about earlier, like that was a close game that they had. Dude, this is a fantastic hire. This was like as good as it was going to get for UNLV, in my opinion. But again, maybe it's unfair that we have to recalibrate expectations because he was hired, you know?
yeah, without a doubt too. Also, I'll get my grade here. I'll go B. I'm just gonna approach with a little bit more caution in terms of just going out full on and saying this is a freaking home run hire. I'm really excited about it and to see what happens there. I love the investment that the program and the school is making in Mullen and the program itself as a football school. A couple things I think are very exciting, and I don't know if it's slam dunk, but I do think Las Vegas is not a football town, right? It is a lot of other things, and but it is not a football town right now. You've got the Raiders coming in who have been terrible and are getting a new coaching staff in there. Listen, UNLV can make some noise in that town. I think that's not crazy to say that at all with Dan Mullen there. We'll see how they use being in a large market like that to their advantage, NIL wise, and what kind of competitive edge they can have when you're talking about playing teams, from Laramie, from Boise, it's from different Albuquerque, like just different settings from being Las Vegas to some other smaller towns there. So we'll see what happens there. But I think it's really, really exciting. The other thing too there that I like this hire and the way they did it is yes, you have a lot of investment put in him, but also, like you said, if he's there for longer than 2 years or whatever it may be, even if he hits it off and he goes back to the Power Two, the buyout is pretty high, like $7 million, and so you get to put that back into your program. And we talked about as G5 schools, like the reality is you have to string together hires, and I think this is their Odom step one. Step two is Dan Mullen. If that hits, step three will be whatever comes after that, and you can just continue to use that program it's in a better spot every single time you're hiring someone new, and you can just continue to grow and build your program. Barry Odom, you have to thank for that because what he did to that program in 2 short years, yes, he's gone, whatever. But the fact they are able to put this much money into it is credit to him and a testimony to what he did and his staff and the players there. Very excited for UNLV. I think the Mountain West being very competitive with a lot of good coaching staffs there, a lot of talent in that spot, in that conference, new coaching staffs, obviously, but you've got a couple good programs there. And you talk about the Mountain West, you talk about Sunbelt, you talk about American, and you talk about programs that are pretty darn good. And you want the competitive balance in those leagues to kind of rise the cream to the top where you can get a spot where you have competitive G5 schools in the playoffs. I think it's something that's a dream of mine. I would love to see that in college football in 2026, 2027, so whatever it may be. But Dan Mullen is obviously a big part of that plan because what he can do offensively and honestly knowing how to run a program like he did, you know.
Give credit to Eric Harper too, the athletic director.
Oh yeah.
He's been there for over a decade. He waited his turn in line, as like senior deputy, whatever, administrator, and he saw, what happens when you hire guy. I mean, Tony Sanchez at first was thought to be a good hire, you know, but he saw the hires of Tony Sanchez and Marcus Arroyo, right? Both of which, like at the time, were like not bad hires. But he gets plugged into AD in 2022, and he pulls a plug immediately on Marcus Arroyo. And he's like, let's go get my guy's Barry Odom. That's my guy. Go get him. Got him. And now his guy's Dan Mullen. So it's 1-for-1 on hires right now. I'm gonna trust him to make decisions like that. Um, let's go. I'm excited, just as you are.